I have lived for 240 cycles. I have stood on the hulls of warships the size of cities. I have watched stars die because we decided they should. And for most of my life, I believed I understood one thing better than anything else in the universe. Strength. I thought I knew what strength was. I would have laughed at you if you told me otherwise. I would have shown you my hands, these long, plated hands that can fold a steel door like wet cloth, and I would have said, this is strength. Look, feel it. I was wrong. I learned how wrong I was on a small, ugly little world at the edge of nowhere. A frontier rocked the humans called Tannen's Reach, and the thing that taught me wasn't a beast, or a weapon, or a god. It was a tired man with a broken arm who would not lie down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it started. Let me tell you who I was before so you understand what I lost and what I found. My name is Tavek. I am Korho. If you have never seen one of my kind, picture this. We stand a head and shoulders taller than the tallest human. Our skin is not skin the way yours is. It is plating, overlapping bone armor that grows thicker as we age, gray and ridged like old stone. We have 4 fingers on each hand and they end in claws we file down for polite company and let grow long for war. Our eyes are amber. We do not blink the way you do. We do not need to. We are strong. I'm not boasting when I say that. It is simply a fact, the way it is a fact that fire is hot. A young Korho, barely grown, can lift more than your largest cargo machines. An adult in his prime can run down a fleeing vehicle and tear the engine block out of it without breaking stride. We were built by evolution on a heavy world, in a hard place, and we came out of it hard. For most of the galaxy, that was the end of the conversation. When the Korho came, you ran, or you knelt, or you died. Those were the choices. Whole civilizations had decided which one they preferred before our ships even broke atmosphere. And we were not even the worst thing we brought. That honor belonged to the Surgrim. You have to understand what the Surgrim meant to us. I don't mean what they did. I mean what they meant. They were not just weapons. They were the thing we worshipped, in the quiet way a soldier worships the thing that keeps him alive. The Surgrim were beasts. Bioengineered war beasts, grown in tanks the size of stadiums, sculpted over 1,000 cycles of careful, ugly science into the perfect instrument of fear. Bigger than a Korho. Bigger than 2 of us, 3 of us. A spine of black armored ridges. A mouth that could close around a vehicle. 6 legs, each one ending in a hooked talon longer than my forearm. And on the front of that great wedge-shaped skull, a row of eyes that did not see the way you and I see. They felt heat. They felt movement. They felt fear, I always thought, though the science gas said that was just a soldier's story. We grew up on stories of the Surgrim. As cubs, we were told that if we were brave, if we were strong, if we were worthy, we might one day stand beside one in battle. To handle a Surgrim was the highest honor a young Korho could earn. The Beast Wardens were our heroes. We pinned their images to the walls of our barracks. We dreamed about them. I dreamed about them. And when I was 60 cycles old, young for us, barely past my first molt, I earned the right to march behind one. I cried that day. I am not ashamed to tell you. I stood in the rain on the training world and I watched a Surgrim the color of a bruise rise up out of its transport pen, and it lifted its head and it screamed, and the sound went through my chest like a fist, and I wept with joy. This, I thought, this is the greatest strength in all of creation, and I am going to stand beside it. I marched behind that beast for 60 more cycles. I saw it do things I cannot describe to you without my voice shaking even now. I saw it level fortifications that had held for 1,000 years. I saw it cross a battlefield and watch the enemy simply stop fighting, drop their weapons, fall to their knees, give up the will to live, because no living thing was supposed to look upon something like that and keep its courage. That was the secret of the Surgrim, you see. They didn't have to win the fight. They won before the fight started. They walked out and the enemy's spirit broke, and a broken enemy is already defeated, and a defeated enemy is easy. In 120 cycles of war, I never once saw that fail. Not once. Until Tannen's Reach. We didn't even want the planet. I want to be honest with you about that because it matters. Tannen's Reach was nothing. A cold, half-dead rock, third out from a dim orange star, with one thin band of habitable land around its waist and ice everywhere else. There were no precious metals worth the fuel to lift them. There was no strategic value. There was nothing there but a few thousand humans who had come out to the edge of the dark to dig in the dirt and be left alone. We came because of a line on a map. The Ascendancy had drawn a border and Tannen's Reach was on the wrong side of it, and the humans were squatting there and the lawcasts said they had to go. That was all. It was not a war. It was paperwork, a clearance action, a formality. The fleet didn't even send a proper force. They sent us a single landing detachment, 400 core hull, 6 dropships, and 1 Surgrim. One was considered overkill. I remember the briefing. I remember our warden, Vorhul, standing in front of the assembled detachment with the tactical display glowing behind him, and I remember the boredom in the room. Boredom. Can you imagine? We were so certain it was nothing that the worst feeling among us was that we were wasting our time. Vorhul was old even then. His plating had gone almost white, and there was a notch out of the ridge above his left eye where something, he never said what, had taken a piece of him a long time ago. He had handled beasts for longer than I had been alive. When he spoke, you listened, because he did not waste words and he did not lie to make you feel better. The settlement is called Brightfall, he said. Population perhaps 4,000, lightly armed. Mining tools, a few hunting rifles, some old colonial defense weapons that haven't fired in a generation. He gestured at the map. A cluster of low buildings huddled in a valley with a frozen river on one side and a wall of mountains behind. We land here. We give them the standard offer. They surrender, they board the transports, they relocate. If they refuse. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Behind him on the display an icon pulsed. The Surgrim's transport pen. We all knew what it meant. Questions, Vorhul said. It wasn't really a question. A young soldier near me, Rank, his name was, a good cub, eager the way I had been eager, raised a hand. Warden, do we expect resistance? Vorhul looked at him for a long moment, and I will never forget what he said, because it was the last time I ever heard him sound certain. Everything resists, Rank, for a little while, and then it sees the beast. He turned back to the map. Nothing resists after that. We dropped at dawn. I remember the cold. Even through my plating, even through the suit, I remember how the cold of that world reached into you. The dropship doors opened, and the air came in like something with teeth, dry and bitter and tasting of metal. Frost on everything. A pale sky the color of an old wound, that orange star sitting low and weak on the horizon like it couldn't be bothered to rise all the way. And below us the valley, Brightfall. It was smaller than I expected. A few hundred buildings, low and rounded against the wind, built from local stone and prefabricated panels that had clearly come down in the first colony ships and never been replaced. Smoke rose from chimneys. There were animal pens and fields under transparent domes, and a water tower painted a faded, hopeful blue. A child's swing in a yard, swinging a little in the wind. It looked, I thought, like a place where people were just trying to live. We came down on the flat ground outside the settlement, all 6 dropships in formation, and the noise of our engines must have been heard for 100 kilometers. The Surgrim's transport landed last and largest, settling onto its struts with a groan of stressed metal, and through the walls of it I could already hear the beast moving. Restless. Hungry. It always knew somehow when it was about to be let out. Vorhul sent the offer the way we always did. A broadcast on every channel, in their own language. We had the translation matrices, of course. We always had the matrices, informing the colonists of Brightfall that their settlement was now within the borders of the Drenok Ascendancy. That they were to assemble in the central square, surrender all weapons, and prepare for relocation, and that they had 1 hour to comply. And then we waited. This was always my favorite part. I want you to understand who I was, so I'm telling you the ugly truth. I liked the waiting. I liked the moment when a settlement received the offer and went silent because I knew what the silence meant. It meant they were afraid. It meant they were arguing among themselves, the brave ones and the wise ones, and that the wise ones would win because the wise ones always won, because the alternative was the beast. We waited, the hour bled away. And Brightfall did something I had never seen a settlement do. It started to organize. We watched it on the long-range optics. We watched the streets fill, not with people fleeing, not with people coming to the square to surrender, but with people moving with purpose. They were carrying things. Children first. We saw the children gathered up and moved, fast and orderly, toward the mountains at the back of the valley, where the optics lost them in the rocks. Then the old ones. Then supplies. And the rest of them, a few hundred maybe, were doing something with the buildings on the edge of the settlement, tearing them apart, dragging the pieces into the streets, stacking, digging. "They're building a wall," Rank said beside me. He sounded baffled. "Warden there, they're fortifying." Vorhul said nothing for a long time. He watched the optics with those old amber eyes, and I could not read his face. "They have 11 minutes," he said finally. "They are using them to build a wall." He made a low sound in his throat that I had never heard from him before. If I had known him better, I might have recognized it. It was the sound a careful old soldier makes when something does not fit the pattern he has spent his life learning. But I didn't recognize it then. I was 60 cycles past my first molt, and I thought I knew everything, and I laughed. I laughed and I said, "Let them build. It only means more of them in one place when we let the beast out." Vorhul turned and looked at me. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me for one long moment, and then he turned back to the optics. I have thought about that look many times since. I think he was deciding whether to tell me something, and I think he decided I wouldn't understand it, and he was right, I wouldn't have. The hour ended. No one came to the square. And so Vorhul gave the order, and we let out the beast. I want to describe it to you properly, because you have to feel what I felt, or none of the rest will make sense. The transport pen split open along its seams with a hiss of escaping pressure and a cloud of freezing vapor, and out of the white came the Surgrim. It was the largest of its line. We called it Grave, not its designation, which was a string of numbers, but the name the wardens used, the way you name a thing you are afraid of to make it smaller. Grave stood as tall as the dropships. Its hide was black, scarred, scaled with armor plates that had turned aside everything from kinetic rounds to plasma. When it moved, the ground moved. I felt it through my feet, through my chest, a deep, slow drumbeat, here, here, here. It lifted its great wedge of a head, and it opened its mouth, and it screamed. I have heard the scream of the Surgrim 100 times, and it never stopped reaching into the oldest part of me, the part that was a small, frightened animal 1,000,000 years before it was a soldier. It is not a sound. It is a judgment. It says, "You are prey. You have always been prey. You only forgot." It rolled out across the valley. It hit the wall the humans had built. It hit the buildings of Brightfall. And then we waited for the thing that always happened next. We waited for the silence to break. We waited for the screaming, the running, the doors flying open, and the figures pouring out in blind panic, scattering into the open where they were easy, where it was simple, where it was over. We waited for Brightfall to break. It did not break. The valley was silent. The wall stood. Behind it, nothing moved that we could see. The smoke still rose from the chimneys. The blue water tower still stood. And the only thing that had changed in the whole settlement was a single sound, drifting up to us thin and small on the cold wind. It took me a moment to understand what it was. Someone somewhere down in that settlement was ringing a bell. Not in panic, not raggedly, in a slow, steady rhythm. Dong, 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 calm, almost peaceful, a sound to gather by. A sound that said, "We are here, we are together, hold the line." Rank looked at me, I looked at Rank. Neither of us had words. Vorhal's voice came over the channel, very quiet. "Advance," he said. "Beast leads, squads follow in support, and a pause, hold formation. No one breaks ranks, whatever you see." Whatever you see. He had never said that before, not in 100 clearances. There was nothing to see. The beast went forward, the enemy broke, and we walked in behind it and did the cleanup. That was the work. That was all it had ever been. But he said it, whatever you see. And we advanced. The first wave should have ended it. Grave hit the wall the humans had built, and the wall was nothing to it, of course, stacked stone and torn up prefab, the work of an hour. The beast went through it the way you would go through a curtain. The stone exploded. Dust went up in a great brown cloud. And out of the dust came the first sounds of the humans fighting back. It was pitiful. I want to tell you it was pitiful, because that is what I thought at the time. Hunting rifles. A few old defense cannons that coughed and spat and barely scratched the beast's hide. Improvised charges that went off with sharp cracks and threw up gouts of dirt and did nothing to that black mountain of armor and muscle. I remember thinking, they're going to make it angry. That's all they'll do. They'll make it angry and it will make this worse for them. But I noticed something, even then. Even through my contempt, I noticed it. They were not firing wildly. They were not panicking. The fire came in patterns. It came in disciplined bursts from cover, and then it stopped, and then it came again from somewhere else. They were trying to draw the beast. They were trying to channel it. They could not hurt it. They knew they could not hurt it, and they were fighting anyway, with intelligence, with coordination, like every one of them knew exactly what they were supposed to do, and exactly why it would not be enough, and they were doing it anyway. I had never seen anything fight that knew it was going to lose. Things that know they are going to lose run. That is the law. That is the oldest law there is. It had never once been broken in front of me. And then I saw the human. I would not learn his name until later. I would not learn any of their names until much later, and some of them I never learned at all, and I have spent a long time since then wishing I had, because they deserved to be named and I did not bother. But him I learned. His name was Cal Renner. He was, I would find out, the settlement's only doctor, not a soldier, a healer, a man whose entire life had been spent putting bodies back together, not breaking them. I saw him first through the optics in my helmet, and I almost didn't register him as a threat at all, because he was not carrying a weapon. He was carrying a body. The beast had broken through the wall and into the first row of buildings, and there had been people there, the firing positions, the brave fools with their rifles, and some of them had not gotten clear in time. And here, into the open, into the killing ground, while the beast turned its great head looking for new things to crush, came a single human, hunched against the cold and the dust and the noise, dragging another human by the shoulders. He was small. They are all small to us, but he was small even for them, wiry, gray-haired, past his prime. And he had a wound. I could see it even from where I stood. His left arm hung wrong, bent at an angle an arm is not supposed to bend, and he was using it anyway, gripping the wounded man's jacket with a hand that should not have been able to grip anything, and he was pulling. The beast saw him. Of course it saw him. The Surgrim see heat, and there he was, a small bright spot of warmth in the cold, moving slow, an easy thing. Grave turned toward him. The ground shook. I felt it from where I stood 100 meters back. Here. And I waited for the man to drop the body and run. That is what they do. That is what everything does. When the beast turns toward you, you let go of whatever you are holding and you run, because the will to live is the strongest thing there is, stronger than love, stronger than loyalty, stronger than courage. That is what I believed. That is what my whole world had taught me. And the beast was the will to live made into a wall, and no will could stand against it. He did not drop the body. He looked up. I saw him look up, saw his small soft face turn toward the mountain of teeth and armor bearing down on him, and I waited for the fear to take him, for his legs to make the choice his mind couldn't. And instead he tightened his grip. He tightened his grip on the wounded man, and he set his feet and he pulled harder. The beast was 40 meters away. 30. He pulled. He got the body to the lip of a doorway, a shattered building, some shelter, and he shoved it through. I saw other hands reach out from the dark and take it, and only then, only when the wounded man was safe, did he turn to face the thing that was about to kill him. He didn't run. He stood in the broken doorway, this small gray man with his arm bent the wrong way, and he stood between the beast and the dark place where he'd put the wounded man, and he would not move. Grave reached him. The head came down, that wedge of bone and teeth, the open mouth, the breath that I knew from 100 fields would smell of rot and chemical and old death. And the man, I will remember this until the day I die, the man reached down to his belt with his one good hand, and he pulled out a flare, a signal flare, a little tube of light, and he struck it and it caught, burning white-hot and furious, and he held it up at those heat-seeing eyes, up at the face of the thing that the whole galaxy fled from. He held a tiny burning light up to a god of fear. And he shouted something. I had the matrices. I heard it translated, half a second later, into a flat machine voice in my ear, and the flatness of it could not kill the thing in his voice, the thing I had never heard before from anything facing the beast. He shouted, "Not today." The flare did something to the Sergrim. I understood it dimly, even in the moment, the eyes that see heat, suddenly flooded with a point of light too hot to look at, the beast's senses overwhelmed, confused. Grave reared back. It screamed, and this time the scream had something in it I had never heard before, something high and wrong, and it took me a moment to understand what it was. It was surprise. The beast was surprised. In 60 cycles of marching behind the Sergrim, I had never seen one surprised. They were the thing that surprised others. They were the end of the line, the bottom of every nightmare, the thing past which there was no further down to go. And this small, soft man with his broken arm and his little burning light had reached up and surprised it. The whole detachment had gone still. 400 Korhal standing in the cold, watching. And I will tell you what was in that stillness, because I felt it move through all of us at once like a current. It was doubt. Vorhil's voice cracked over the channel, sharp now, all the boredom gone. Beast Warden, control your animal, bring it back to the line. And the warden tried. I heard the control signals go out, felt the subsonic pulse of the command collar around the beast's throat. Return, heal, come back. But the beast didn't want to come back. The beast wanted the small, bright thing that had hurt its eyes. It was angry now, truly angry, the way I had only ever seen it angry after it had been wounded. And nothing had wounded it, nothing could wound it, except that one man had made it feel, for half a second, the thing it spent its whole existence making others feel. Grave lunged, and the man dove sideways, faster than I thought something so small and broken could move, and the teeth came down on the empty doorway and shattered it to dust, and the man rolled up onto his feet in the rubble, and he was already moving, already running, not away, not back to safety, but sideways, drawing the beast, leading it, the way I'd seen the others do it with their rifle fire. He was bait. He had made himself bait, on purpose. With a broken arm and a signal flare, he had turned himself into the most important target on the field, and he was leading the most dangerous creature in the galaxy away from the dark place where the wounded and the helpless were hidden. And then I understood the wall. I understood all of it. The wall had never been meant to stop us. The wall was a funnel. The firing positions, the patterns, the channeled fire, they had been hurting the beast from the very first shot down a particular street toward a particular place. And the man with the flare was the last piece, the lure, the thing that would make the beast forget its training, its handlers, its leash, and follow. Follow it where? I got my answer a heartbeat later. The street the beast had been herded down ended at the foot of the mountains, at the mouth of what I had taken to be a mining tunnel, a great dark opening in the rock, big enough to swallow even the Sergrim. The man ran for it. The beast followed, screaming, all its enormous fury narrowed down to one small fleeing point of heat. The man reached the tunnel mouth. He didn't go in. He stopped, turned, and threw the flare, threw it deep into the dark of the tunnel, a tumbling point of light vanishing into the black, and then he threw himself flat against the rock to one side of the opening. And the beast, following the light, following the heat, following the only thing in the universe it wanted in that moment, plunged into the tunnel after it. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the mountain came down. They had mined it. Of course they had mined it. They were miners. That was the one thing on that worthless rock there was any reason to be, and they knew rock and they knew charges and they knew, better than anyone in the galaxy, how to bring a mountain down on top of something. The whole face of the mountain dropped. A wall of stone and ice and dust, thousands and thousands of tons of it, folding down over the tunnel mouth, over the beast inside, with a roar that I felt in my teeth from 100 meters away. The ground bucked under us. The dust came up in a cloud that blotted out the weak orange sun. And then it was quiet. The bell had stopped ringing. We stood in the silence and the settling dust, 400 Korhal who had come to do paperwork, and where the Surgrim had been there was now a mountain of rubble, and somewhere under that mountain the greatest weapon of my people, the thing I had wept with joy to march beside, the thing the whole galaxy fled before, was buried alive. I could not breathe. I want you to understand that. I, Tavek, who could fold a steel door, who could run down a vehicle, I could not get air into my body, because the world I had lived in my whole life had just ended. The thing I had built my understanding of strength upon had just been beaten. And it hadn't been beaten by something stronger. It hadn't been beaten by a bigger beast, or a better weapon, or a higher god. It had been beaten by a small, soft, gray-haired man with a broken arm, who should have run and didn't. When the dust cleared, I looked for him. I don't know why. I think part of me needed to see that he was dead, needed the world to make sense again, needed the law to be the law. Those who stand against the beast die. I looked for his body in the rubble at the foot of the mountain. He wasn't dead. He was sitting up against a boulder, half buried in dust, holding his broken arm against his chest. And as I watched, 2 other humans came running out from the rocks, and they pulled him up, and one of them, a young one, a woman, threw her arms around him, and I saw his face crease, and I realized he was laughing, or crying. From that distance I could not tell which, and I have come to understand they are sometimes the same thing for humans, and that this is one of the strangest and strongest things about them. He was alive, and his people were alive, and the beast was buried. And then he did the last thing, the thing that I think changed me forever, though I did not know it yet. He looked up. He looked across the killing ground, across the rubble and the dust, at the 400 armored Korhal standing frozen at the edge of his ruined settlement. He looked right at us. Right, it felt, at me. And he did not look afraid. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had done a terrible amount of work and knew there was more work to come. He looked the way Vorhol looked sometimes, when he thought no one was watching. He looked like someone who had already decided what he was willing to lose, and had made his peace with it, and was simply waiting to see how much the universe was going to ask of him. And then this small, broken, exhausted man, who had nothing, no weapon, no beast, no fleet, no plating, nothing but a flare that had already burned out, this man lifted his good hand. And he beckoned us. "Come on then," the gesture said, "I'm still here, come and try." Beside me, Rink made a small sound. When I looked at him, his amber eyes were wide, and his claws had come out without his deciding it, the way they do when we are afraid. "Tavek," he whispered, "Tavek, what are they?" I opened my mouth to answer him. I was going to say something certain. I was going to say something I knew. I had answers for everything then. That was who I was. But I had no answer. For the first time in my life, I had no answer at all. Down the line, Vorhol had gone very still. The old warden was staring at the buried mountain, at the small defiant figure beckoning us forward, and on his ancient scarred face was an expression I had never seen there in all the cycles I had served under him. It was the expression of a soldier who has just realized he has spent his whole life fighting the wrong war. He raised his hand, the order to attack, 400 Korhal against a few hundred exhausted miners with hunting rifles. We would win. Of course we would win. We did not need the beast. We had never needed the beast. The beast was only there to make it easy, to make them break before the fighting started. But they had not broken. And looking at that small man with his raised hand, his come and try, every one of us understood, all at once and without a word, the thing Vorhul had understood a moment sooner. They were never going to break. We could kill them. We could kill every last one of them, but we could not make them break. And a soldier who has spent his life winning by breaking the enemy before the fight, what is he supposed to do when he meets an enemy who simply will not break? Vorhul's raised hand trembled. And then slowly he lowered it. "Hold," he said, his voice was rough. "Hold position. No one advances, no one fires." "Warden," Renk's voice cracked. "Warden, the beast is they killed the beast. Our orders." "Our orders," Vorhul said, "were to clear a settlement of people we were told would surrender." He turned and looked down the line at all of us, his amber eyes moving from face to face. "Look at them. Look. Does that look like something that surrenders?" None of us answered. "I have done this work for 200 cycles," Vorhul said, and his voice was very quiet now, and somehow that made it carry further than a shout. "I have cleared more worlds than I can name, and every single time the beast walked out and they broke and we won, and I told myself that was strength, that we were strong, and that strength was the thing that made the weak kneel." He looked back at the buried mountain. "I was a fool. That was never strength. That was only fear. We were never strong. We were only frightening. And there is a difference, and I have just lived 200 cycles without learning it, and that man down there learned it in an afternoon." The wind moved across the valley. The dust was settling. Somewhere behind the rocks where the children had been hidden, a sound was rising, thin at first, then stronger. The humans were coming back out, not to fight, to see, to count their living and their dead, to begin the terrible work of going on. And the small gray man stood among them, his arm against his chest, and he watched us watch him, and he did not lower his hand. "What do we do?" Rank whispered. Vorhul was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," he said, and from the oldest, hardest soldier I had ever known, those 3 words were the most frightening thing I heard on that entire world. For the first time in my life, cub, I don't know. I have told you that this was the day I learned I was wrong about strength. But that is not quite true. That day, standing in the cold, watching a buried mountain and a beckoning man, I did not yet understand what I had seen. I only knew that something I had believed was no longer true. The way you know a bone is broken before you understand how badly, before the pain truly comes. The understanding came later. It came over the days that followed, and there were days that followed, strange and impossible days, because Vorhul did not give the order, and the fleet was far away and slow to answer, and 400 Korhal sat in the cold outside a settlement we had been sent to destroy and did not destroy it, while our warden tried to find words for a report that would explain the unexplainable. The understanding came when I finally walked down into Brightfall myself, unarmed, on Vorhul's orders, to do the one thing none of us had ever done before. To talk to them. To talk to the people who would not break. And it came when I finally stood face to face with the small gray man whose name I would learn was Cal Renner. And when he looked up at me, all 8 feet of armored Korhal, all the strength of a heavy world bred into me, and he was not afraid, and I asked him, through the matrix, the only question I had left in me. I asked him, "Why didn't you run?" And what he told me, what that small, soft, breakable man told me, standing in the ruins of everything he had spent his life building, was the thing that finally taught me what real strength was. But that is the next part of the story. I told you I would tell you what the small gray man said when I asked him why he didn't run. I will, I promise I will. But I need you to walk with me first, the way I had to walk first, because the answer doesn't mean anything until you've seen what I saw on the road to it. You can't be handed the truth about strength. Nobody can. You have to earn the right to understand it, and I earned mine slowly, one step at a time, walking down into a ruined human settlement with my weapons left behind me in the dust. So walk with me. It took Vorhal 3 days to make the decision. 3 days of 400 Korhal sitting in the cold outside Brightfall, while the fleet, far away and busy with bigger wars, sent us nothing but silence, and then, at last, a single curt message demanding to know why the clearance was not complete and why the beast's life signs had gone dark. Vorhal did not answer the message right away. I think he didn't know how. How do you explain it? I heard him say once low to no one. How do you write a report that says, I brought the strongest weapon in the galaxy to a settlement of farmers, and the farmers buried it, and now I am afraid to give the order to attack, not because I think we'll lose, but because I no longer understand what winning would mean. There is no form for that. There is no field on the report for that. In those 3 days, Brightfall did not attack us either. That was its own kind of strange. They had beaten the beast. They could have used the chaos, the night, the mountains they knew, and we didn't. They could have come for us in the dark. We were ready for it. We slept in shifts, weapons close. They didn't come. Instead, on the morning of the second day, we watched them through the optics, and we saw them doing something that made no sense to us at all. They were burying their dead. Not hiding them, not burning them for hygiene, the cold, practical thing. Burying them, digging into the frozen ground with hand tools, one grave at a time, slow, brutal work in that bitter cold, and then standing around each grave in a circle. Not for a minute, for a long time. We watched them stand in the cold around small mounds of dirt for an hour at a time, and we could not understand it, because to us a body is a body, the spark gone out of it, a thing to be disposed of, and these people were treating each one like it was the most important object in the universe. Why are they doing that? Rank asked me. We were on watch together. The dead can't fight, the dead can't dig. Why waste the daylight? Why waste the warmth? I didn't have an answer, but I remember I kept watching, long after Rank had looked away, because something in it caught in my chest like a hook, and I couldn't say why. I watched one circle in particular, a small one off to the side around a grave smaller than the others. There was a child there, a girl, very young, and an old woman holding her, and a few others. And the small gray man ran her. He was there. His arm was bound up properly now in a sling, and he stood with the others around that small grave, and he did not speak, and he did not move for a very long time. A small grave, a child's grave. I understood then with a lurch that one of the dead was a child. That somewhere in the fighting, in the herding of the beast down that street, in the brave, terrible work of saving the others, a child had died. And they had not abandoned the body. They had carried it out and washed it and dug into frozen rock with their hands to lay it down gently, and they were standing around it in the killing cold, losing daylight, losing warmth, grieving. When grief could not bring the child back, and the cold could kill more of them. It was, by every law I had ever been taught, the most foolish thing a creature could do. And I could not stop watching it, and I did not understand yet that what I was watching was the answer to my question, laid out in front of me in the dirt, days before I would think to ask it. On the third day, Vorhal sent for me. He was in his quarters in the command dropship, and he was sitting in the dark, and the report form glowed on the screen in front of him, empty. He had not written a word of it. Tavek, he said, you laughed. I didn't understand. Warden. On the ridge, the first day, when they were building the wall, and I said they were using their last minutes to build a wall, you laughed and said it only meant more of them in one place. He turned and looked at me with those old amber eyes. "Do you still find it funny?" "No, Warden," I said, and it was the truth. I had not laughed in 3 days. I did not think I would laugh again for a long time. "Good," he said. "Then you are the one I'll send." "Send where?" "Down." He nodded toward the settlement. "Unarmed. I want to know what they are. I have spent 200 cycles never once needing to know what anything was. I only needed to know what frightened it. That knowledge is no good to me now. So I am going to do the thing I have never done. I am going to ask." He looked at the empty report. "And I cannot go myself. If the warden walks down there unarmed and they kill him, the detachment loses its head and this becomes a massacre, and I think that is the one thing left in this universe I am not willing to be part of." He was quiet a moment. "But you, a single soldier walking down unarmed. They beckoned us, Tavak, the man with the flare beckoned us. I do not think he meant come and die. I think he meant come and see. So go and see, and come back and tell me what we have been fighting." I did not want to go. I will be honest. I, who had marched behind the beast without fear into 100 broken cities, was afraid to walk unarmed into one small valley of farmers. Because the broken cities had never frightened me. Broken things are not frightening. But Brightfall was not broken. Brightfall had buried the thing that broke worlds, and I did not know what an unbroken thing would do to me. I went anyway. That too is a kind of strength I would learn. Going anyway. But I didn't know it yet. I only knew I had been given an order and that some part of me, some new part, born 3 days ago on a cold ridge, needed to know the answer as badly as Vorhol did. I left my weapons in the dropship. All of them. I walked down the slope into the valley with my hands empty and my claws filed and my plating bare, and I felt naked in a way I had never felt in my life. They saw me coming, of course, from a long way off. A single core hull, 8 feet of armored death, walking alone into their settlement. And I watched them react, and the reaction was nothing I expected. They did not run. By now that did not surprise me, but they did not raise their weapons either. They went still and they watched me, and a kind of message seemed to pass through them without anyone saying anything, and then slowly the ones nearest me stepped aside. They made a path. Wary ready, hands near their tools and their rifles, but they made a path, and at the end of it, waiting, stood the small gray man. Cal Renner. He looked smaller up close. They always do your people up close, small and soft and so easily ended, all that warmth held in such a thin and breakable shell. He came up to the middle of my chest. His face was lined and gray-stubbled and gray-haired, and one arm was in a sling, and his other hand hung open and empty at his side, and his eyes were the steadiest thing I have ever looked into. Not hard, not cold, steady, the way bedrock is steady. The way a thing is steady when it has already faced the worst the universe can do, and decided to keep standing anyway. We looked at each other for a long moment, the killer and the healer, the strong and the strong, though I did not yet know that we were both of those things, or which of us was which. Then he spoke, and the matrix in my ear turned it flat and gray, the way it always did, but I could hear under the flatness the real voice, tired and rough and unafraid. "You left your guns behind," he said. "That's either very brave or very stupid. I've found those are usually the same thing." I did not know what to say, so I said the only honest thing in me. "I came to ask you something." He studied me. Then he nodded slowly toward a low building behind him, one of the few still whole. "Then you'd better come in out of the cold," he said. "You ask big questions standing in the wind, you lose the answer to the weather. Come on, there's a fire." And he turned his back on me, on 8 feet of armored core hull, on the thing his whole galaxy fled from, and he walked into the building, trusting me to follow and not to kill him. I have thought about that too, about what it costs to turn your back, about the strength it takes to trust. I had never once in my life turned my back on an enemy. We were taught not to. We were taught the back is where death comes from. He turned his back on me like it was nothing, like trust was the most natural thing in the world. I followed him inside. The room was small and warm and full of the smell of your people, that warm, living, breathing smell, so unlike the cold metal of the fleet. There was a fire in a stone hearth. There were cots along the walls, and on the cots were the wounded, and the air was full of the sounds the wounded make. A few others moved among them, healers like him or those learning to be. And in the corner, on a pile of blankets, sat the child, the young girl, the one I had seen at the small grave. She was not the one who had died then. I felt something loosen in my chest that I had not known was clenched. But she had lost someone. I could see it in her. She sat very still and very quiet, the terrible stillness of a young thing that has seen too much, and she watched me come in with eyes that held no fear at all, only a flat, exhausted wariness that no child should ever have. Renner saw me looking at her. "That's Tess," he said quietly. "She lost her father the first day. He was on the wall." He lowered himself onto a bench by the fire, slow, careful of his arm. He was the one ringing the bell so everyone would know to hold. He looked into the fire. He kept ringing it after the beast came through. He could have run. The bell tower was the most dangerous place in the settlement once that thing was loose. But people steady to a bell, see. People hold to a sound that doesn't stop. So he didn't stop. A long pause. "He's the small grave. The other small grave you'd have seen if you were watching. I figure you were watching." I had been watching. I said so. "Sit down," Renner said. "You're making the wounded nervous, standing there like a wall. Sit." There was no seat that would hold me. I lowered myself to the floor by the fire, folding my long limbs down until I was nearer his height, and even then I towered over him. He did not seem to notice or care. "Ask your question," he said. So I asked it. "Why didn't you run?" He was quiet for a long time. The fire popped. One of the wounded moaned in his sleep and a healer went to him. The child, Tess, watched us both with her flat, tired eyes. "You'll have to be more specific," Renner said at last. "There was a lot of not running. We're stubborn people." "On the first day," I said, "when the beast turned toward you, you were carrying a wounded man. You should have dropped him and run. The will to live, it is the strongest thing there is. Stronger than loyalty, stronger than courage. When the beast turns toward you, the body chooses life. Every creature in the galaxy drops what it is carrying and runs. It is the oldest law there is." I heard my own voice and it sounded lost even to me. "You did not run. You held tighter. Why? I have to know why." "Because if the will to live is not the strongest thing, then I do not know what is. And I have built my whole life on knowing what is strongest." Renner looked at me for a long moment, and then he did something I did not expect. He laughed, soft, tired, not unkind. "The will to live," he said. "Is that what they teach you? That the strongest thing in a person is the part that wants to keep breathing?" "It is what I have always seen," I said. "On 100 worlds, the beast comes and the will to live takes over and they break and they run and they kneel." "And you call that strength?" "We call it the law." He nodded slowly. He looked into the fire. "The man I was carrying," he said. "His name is Aldous. He's still alive. He's over there, third cot. He's a miner. He's also the man who taught me everything I know about mountains, which is the only reason any of us are still breathing, because it was his charges that brought that thing down." He turned back to me. "But that's not why I didn't drop him. I didn't drop him because—" He stopped, tried again. "How do I explain this to something like you? Let me ask you something instead. The other soldiers up on that ridge with you, the ones in the armor. If one of them fell and the beast was coming, would you stop and pick him up? Or would you run?" I opened my mouth to answer and found I could not, because the honest answer shamed me. "We are taught," I said slowly, "that the wounded are a burden, that to carry a fallen soldier into danger risks 2 lives where one is already lost. We are taught that the fallen would want us to save ourselves, that it is efficient, that it is correct." "So you'd leave him?" "I have left them," I said, and it was the first time in my life I had ever said it aloud, and it tasted like rot in my mouth. "I have left my own behind when the orders came to fall back, and I did not look at their faces, because if you do not look at their faces it is easier, and I told myself it was strength. I told myself only the weak go back for the fallen. Only the weak let love make them foolish. I looked at the fire because I could not look at him. I told myself that running on, leaving them, winning, that was the strong thing. Renner was quiet. "That's the difference," he said softly. "That's the whole difference right there. You've got it exactly backwards, and you've had it backwards for so long you built a whole empire on it." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his tired, steady eyes holding mine. "Strength isn't the part of you that wants to keep breathing," he said. "Any animal's got that. A worm's got that. That's not strength, that's just biology. Strength is the part of you that decides there's something worth more than your next breath, and then holds on to it when every screaming animal instinct in your body is telling you to let go and run." He nodded toward the cot where the man Aldous lay sleeping. "I didn't carry him because I'm tougher than that beast. Look at me. I'm an old man with a busted arm. That thing could have swallowed me whole and not noticed. I carried him because if I dropped him and run, I'd have lived, and I'd have spent every day after that being a man who drops people and runs. And that's not living, that's just breathing. And I decided a long time ago that I'd rather stop breathing as a man who carries people than keep breathing as a man who drops them." He shrugged, one-shouldered, careful of the sling. "That's it. That's the whole secret. There's no secret. We're not stronger than you. We're not braver even, not really. We're just bound to each other. And a thing that's bound to something bigger than itself can't be broken by something that only threatens the self. You can kill us. You did kill us. But you can't break us because the thing that holds us together isn't in any one body for you to threaten." I sat in the warm room and I could not breathe again, the way I could not breathe on the ridge. Because he was right. That was why Brightfall had not broken. The beast threatened the body, and the body alone fears the beast above all things. But Brightfall was not a collection of bodies. Brightfall was a thing between the bodies, a web of binding so strong that no single death could collapse it, a strength that did not live in any one breakable shell where the beast could reach it. The father rang the bell because the people steadied to the bell. The man held the wall because the others held beside him. Renner carried the wounded, because to be the kind of man who carries the wounded was worth more to him than his own next breath. They had something we did not have, something we had thrown away so long ago we had forgotten we ever had it. We had made ourselves frightening by making ourselves alone, every core hull a fortress, every fortress willing to abandon every other, all of us strong as stone and brittle as stone, and we had called that strength because we had never met anything that was bound. And then we met Brightfall. And Brightfall could not be frightened, because you cannot frighten a thing that has already decided there is something worth more than its fear. I sat with Cal Renner for a long time. We talked. I asked him things and he answered, and he asked me things in return, and this astonished me. He listened to my answers as though they mattered, as though I were a person and not a weapon. The child, Tess, crept closer as we talked, until she was sitting near the fire near me, this small, grieving human child within reach of claws that could have ended her, and she fell asleep there against the warmth, trusting the room to keep her safe. Trusting the room that contained me. I have killed in my life. I will not pretend otherwise to you. I have done the work of the ascendancy on 100 worlds, and there is blood on me that will never wash off, and I do not ask you to forgive it. But I tell you this. The moment that small child fell asleep within reach of my hands, trusting, was the moment the old Tavak died. The one who laughed on the ridge. The one who left the fallen and did not look at their faces. He died right there on the floor of a healer's house, with a sleeping human child against his arm and a fire popping in the hearth, and I did not mourn him because he had never really been strong. He had only ever been frightening, and there is a difference. There is all the difference in the world. When I rose to go, carefully, so carefully, not to wake the child, Renner walked me to the door. "What'll you do?" he asked. "You're warden the fleet, what happens now?" "I don't know," I said. It was the truth. "Will you come back to finish us?" I looked at him, at the steady eyes, the bound thing behind them that no beast could break. "No," I said, and I had no authority to say it. I was one soldier. But I said it and I meant it, and somehow saying it made it true, the way the father ringing the bell made the holding true, the way a thing becomes real when someone decides it is worth more than their fear. No, we will not come back to finish you. He studied me. Then he nodded once and held out his good hand, that small, soft, breakable hand to me. I did not know what the gesture meant. He saw that I didn't. It's how we say we're not enemies, he said. You take it, you hold it for a second, you let go. I reached out one enormous armored hand, and I took his small, warm one as gently as I have ever done anything in my life, terrified of breaking it, and I held it for a second, and I let it go. Go home, Tavak, he said. Tell them what you saw, tell them strength isn't the thing they think it is. They probably won't listen. People built on a lie don't like being told it's a lie, but tell them anyway. He smiled, tired. Tell them anyway. Some things are worth saying even when no one wants to hear them, especially then. I walked back up the slope in the cold with my hands empty and my heart full of a thing I had no name for, and I went to Vorhul, and I told him everything. He listened without a word, the old warden, all the way through, and when I finished he was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to the report form, still glowing, still empty after 3 days. And he began at last to write. I do not know exactly what he wrote. I never saw the full report. But I know what came of it, and so I can tell you the shape of it. He wrote that the clearance of Tannen's Reach was not possible. He wrote that the settlement of Brightfall could not be made to surrender, and that to destroy it would require the annihilation of every living thing in it, down to the children, and that this would not be a clearance but a slaughter, and that he, Warden Vorhul, after 200 cycles of service, would not give that order and would not stand by while it was given. He wrote, and this is the part the fleet could not forgive, that he no longer believed the doctrine of the beast, that he had watched the strongest weapon in the galaxy be defeated not by a greater force but by a people who would not break, and that this meant the entire foundation of how the ascendancy made war was wrong, that we had mistaken fear for strength for so long that we no longer knew the difference, that somewhere out in the dark there was a species that had learned to bind itself together so tightly that it could not be broken, and that if we met them as enemies we would lose, not because they were stronger in body, but because they were stronger in the only way that finally matters, and that we should not meet them as enemies at all. He sent it. And then we waited, and the fleet's answer came. And it was exactly what you would expect from an empire built on a lie that has just been told it's a lie. They relieved Vorhul of command. They recalled the detachment. They sent another force, a larger one with 3 beasts, to do what we would not. But here is the thing about a truth, once it is spoken, once it is out, walking around in the world, you cannot put it back. You can punish the one who spoke it, but you cannot unspeak it, and Vorhul had spoken it to 400 Korhul who had all stood on that ridge and watched a mountain come down on the thing they worshipped. We had all seen it. You cannot make 400 soldiers unsee a thing. When the order came to withdraw, we withdrew. We had no choice. We were soldiers, and soldiers withdraw when ordered. But before we lifted, I did one thing, one small thing. I broke discipline for the first and only time in my life, and I went down the slope again alone to the edge of Brightfall, and I found a sentry, a young human, rifle ready, watching me come, and I gave him a message for Renner. I told him another force is coming, 3 beasts, soon. Take your people into the deep tunnels, the ones even your own maps don't show. Take everything you'll need to last a long time. They cannot bring the mountains down on you if you are already inside the mountains. And I told him the patrol routes the new force would use, and the gaps in them, and the timings, everything I knew, everything a traitor knows, and I was a traitor in that moment, and I have never been prouder of anything I have done. The young sentry stared at me. Why, he said, why would you tell us this? And I gave him the only answer I had, the answer Renner had given me, turned around and handed back. Because there are some things worth more than my next breath, I said, and I have only just learned it, and I would rather stop breathing as a thing that warns you than keep breathing as a thing that buries you. Then I went back up the slope, and we lifted off Tannen's Reach, and I never set foot on that cold, ugly little world again. I will not tell you that it ended cleanly. Truth doesn't mostly. The second force came. There was fighting, terrible fighting, I heard, far worse than ours. But Brightfall had gone into the mountains, the deep tunnels, with everything they needed and a warning they should never have had. And 3 beasts are no use against an enemy you cannot find. An enemy already inside the rock. An enemy bound so tight that starving them out only made the binding stronger. It dragged on. It became, against every expectation, a thing the Ascendancy could not win, a small worthless rock that cost more ships and more soldiers and more of the precious beasts than it could ever be worth, all over a line on a map, all over a few thousand humans who would not break. And word of it spread the way truth spreads, quietly from soldier to soldier. There is a place where the beast lost. There is a people who will not break. There is a kind of strength we do not have and have never had. That word is still spreading. I am part of how it spreads. That is why I am telling you this, all these cycles later, an old soldier with white plating and a notch out of my pride where the truth took a piece of me a long time ago. The Ascendancy is not what it was. The doctrine of the beast is dying slowly, the way a thing dies when it was always hollow and finally everyone admits it. We make war differently now, those of us who lived through the change. Some of us do not make war at all anymore. Some of us went looking for the humans later, not as enemies but as students, to learn the thing they knew. A few of them taught us. They are generous that way, your people, more generous than we ever deserved. Vorhul did not live to see most of it. They did not execute him. Even the Ascendancy could not quite bring itself to execute a warden of 200 cycles. But they broke him, took his rank, his honors, his beasts, everything he had built his life on, and he died not long after, an old soldier in a small room with nothing. I was with him at the end. He was not afraid. I asked him near the end if he regretted it, the report, the truth, all of it. He looked at me with those old amber eyes and he said, I spent 200 cycles being frightening, Tavak. I got to spend my last few being strong. It is not a bad trade. I only wish I had learned the difference sooner. And then he said the last thing he ever said to me, and I have carried it ever since, and I give it to you now because it is the truest thing I know, and it was given to me, and a gift like that is meant to be passed on. He said, we thought the monsters were the strong ones. You and I, we worshipped the things that made the galaxy kneel. But the beast only ever knew how to make things afraid. It never once knew how to make a thing stand. And in the end, Cub, in the very end, the only strength that ever mattered was the strength to stand. So, that is the story. That is how an old killer learned what strength was, on a cold, ugly rock at the edge of nowhere, from a small gray man with a broken arm who would not let go of the thing he was carrying. I have lived a long time. I have seen the beasts that made worlds kneel, and I have seen them buried by farmers, and I know now which of those 2 things was strong and which was only frightening, and I will tell you, because someone has to, because some things are worth saying even when no one wants to hear them. I thought monsters were strong. I thought strength was the thing in you that wants to keep breathing, the claws, the plating, the beast that makes the galaxy run. I built my whole life on it. I left the fallen behind and called it wisdom. I made myself a fortress and called it power. And I was wrong, and I was wrong for 120 cycles, and it took a broken-armed healer one cold afternoon to show me. Strength was never the monster. Strength was the small, soft, breakable thing that looked up at the monster and held a tiny burning light to its face and would not run. Strength was the bell that did not stop ringing. Strength was the hand that would not let go. I thought monsters were strong. I was wrong about almost everything. But I am old now, and I have made my peace with it, because being wrong was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the thing that finally taught me how to stand. And if you ever meet a monster of your own, and you will, Everyone does, sooner or later, in one shape or another. I hope you remember what a tired old killer learned too late and is trying to hand to you in time. You do not have to be bigger than the monster. You only have to refuse to let go. Not today. That's what he said to it. The small gray man, the healer, with his little light held up to the face of a god of fear. Not today. I have said it to my own monsters many times in the cycle since. I say it still. And every time I say it, I think of him and of a cold valley and of a child who fell asleep trusting a room that held me and of an old warden who spent his last days being strong. Not today. It is the strongest thing I know how to say. I hope you find your own reason to say it. And I hope when the time comes that you do not run.